I just built this 12 foot by 12 foot shed by myself, and now we're gonna see if we can actually light it on fire. So, you might be asking yourself, why in the world would I be trying to light my beautiful shed that I'm turning into a home gym into ash? Well, in this final culmination video of this project, we're going to be applying a specialty paint that I've never tried before, but provides fire protection for your dwelling. We are going to put this paint to the test to see what truly happens when you take a flame to it, but you're going to have to stay tuned till the end to see that one because we first need to get it applied. With any good painting project, it all starts with the prep. And for the first application of prep, we have to make sure that we are caulking all of our seams. On this project, we went with DAP Dynaflex Ultra, which is definitely one of their more advanced and durable product lines. It's all weather protection, plus it's crack proof, and it's perfect for those gaps where we did have to make sure and account for at least 1/8 of an inch of space in between our hardy plank and our vertical trim in our corners. Plus, this product can dry extremely quickly and can be ready for rain or paint within an hour, which is definitely nice here in the Pacific Northwest, especially during this time of year. We do also want to make sure that we get all the seams in between those trim boards because those are other areas of water intrusion potentially, and paint will most likely fill those gaps up for the most part, but inevitably we want to guarantee ourselves a nice cohesive waterproof seal in the end, so make sure you get all of those seams as well. As our caulk dries on our structure, it's time for some taping. Of course, with any project, you're going to want to tape off any areas where you don't want paint on. Inevitably, the vast majority are going to be any doors or windows, decking, and of course on this project, our siding above. We put a lot of time and energy into our cedar siding, and therefore I don't want any overspray whatsoever on these beautiful boards. So in order to make sure that that doesn't happen, we're applying a consistent layer of tape all the way across on the bottom, along with a nice layer of masking paper. This is certainly not going to be the only amount of protection that we're going to be utilizing, but this certainly will take care of the majority. Just note that the finish that we applied to our cedar deck boards made the board so smooth that I couldn't even apply a standard piece of painter's tape to it. I had to apply duct tape, and that barely held. Once we have the entire perimeter protected on the top, we needed to go around the entire perimeter on the bottom. I'm obviously most concerned with our deck boards, but I certainly want to protect all of the other surrounding areas as well. With a simple layer of plastic visqueen along with some tape, you're able to completely make sure that all these surrounding areas don't get any overspray on it, and it's obviously something you don't have to worry about getting wet if the rain is in the forecast. Luckily for me, I was able to take care of all the exterior painting before the rain came, but when it came time to the interior portion, I definitely had rain to account for. With the door tape that I applied earlier, there was some overhang on the inside corners around the entire perimeter, and that's why I'm able to easily apply a layer of visqueen around the entire doorway so I can move on to more important things like painting. Now that we have our structure fully prepped out, ready for paint, it's time for paint. For our project, we are going with something that's extremely unique. This is Firecoat, and it's a primer that interacts with heat. So if you took a flame to this product, it interacts with that heat and all of a sudden creates a protective layer over the structure or whatever this product is applied to. Very unique, very impressive, and I really want to test it out for myself to see how truly fireproof it is. First things first, let's get it applied. Because of the unique nature of this product, it's extremely thick, and therefore making sure that it's fully mixed thoroughly is vitally important in order for it to be sprayed properly. By using a paddle mixer for a couple minutes, we're guaranteeing ourselves that the product is fully mixed and ready for application. Now, you can apply this with a brush or roller, but of course, the most efficient way, especially if we've done all this prep, is to use a sprayer. Because this paint is so thick, you do want to make sure that you have a properly powerful sprayer, which has a capacity of at least 2100 psi. Our sprayer that we're using today is listed at 2800 psi, so that should be plenty for the application process. However, just as important as the PSI is the tip size. Now, the tip instructions say that you need to have a tip that is a 531 or greater, and therefore I picked up one that is 629. However, I completely forgot about how to read a tip size properly, because the first number in your spray tip accounts for the overall size of the fan, and the next two numbers is the hole size or the quantity of paint that can be presented or pushed out of the tip. That is a huge factor when it comes to tip size because of how thick the particles are in this paint. You might have noticed that during application, it is not a fluid transition of paint onto the wall sometimes, and that's because I had a number of clogs due to the fact that I didn't have the proper sized tip. It needs to be at least a 31, and in all honesty, I picked up a 33, and that provided a much more fluid application process during the spraying. This first layer was applied with a 629, and as you can see, we were still able to get the product applied on the walls, but it just wasn't a smooth process, which I certainly want you to account for if you do apply this product to your own structure or home. After we have one layer of paint applied to our entire structure, I do grab a paint gauge and determine how thick the film is that we're applying, because we do want to have at least a 7 mil thickness, which can be easily accounted for if you have a paint gauge. All you have to do is apply it evenly against your house while the paint is still wet. Then press it against your hand and it will show you which prongs have paint on it, which will then allow you to indicate exactly how deep the paint is. With this first application, we are at approximately 5 mils, which is appropriate because this paint needs at least 2 layers of application. So a secondary layer is going to get us to at least 7 mils, and we just need to wait for the first coat to dry, which generally is going to be between 2 to 5 hours depending on the ambient temperature outside. One tool that's extremely valuable to have on hand during the application process is also a paint shield. It's basically just a large aluminum panel that you can put in certain unique directions and angles to guarantee that all that overspray isn't getting onto areas where you don't want it. We obviously already have these areas taped off, but a shield will provide just a little bit more accurate overspray accountability from someone like myself who's not a professional painter. With our second layer applied, I let it dry overnight and come back to our structure the very next day to start our finish coat. Now, Firecoat is just a primer coat, which is nice because we're able to use any other latex related product right over the top of it and not damage the warranty of the product. This is obviously a really nice feature because this means that we're able to paint our structure any color we so choose, which in this application, we're deciding to paint it the same exact color as our house. And luckily for us, it's extremely similar to the blue-gray tone that the Firecoat provided already. As you might have noticed, this product is being applied in a much more fluid, seamless fashion because I had the right tip for this paint. This is a latex paint, which is a much thinner type product, so I'm using a 515 tip, which is very fluid and continuous. And because this paint color is so similar to the Firecoat that we've already applied, I'm only in need of one layer of this paint to finish off the exterior portion of this project. Definitely a time saver, and the reason why I'm immediately able to proceed with the interior portion of this project right after I apply my final coat on the exterior. We just need to remove a little bit of this visqueen. And speaking of removal, if you ever want to remove the stickers that are on OSB or plywood, you can easily take a heat gun to it, heat up that glue slightly, and it easily comes off right after that. If you didn't know already, this 12 foot by 12 foot shed is going to be turned into a workout facility, and I will be covering up all these deck boards eventually with some mats, but I certainly don't want to get any of the overspray onto these deck boards just because in future, who knows what I'm going to be utilizing this space for. In order to protect all of these decking boards, I do go around the entire perimeter applying a piece of tape around, and then cover up the vast majority of our deck boards with a large piece of visqueen. As I was going to tape off the door on the inside, I did quickly realize that, oh, that's right, I don't have trim around the door. And in order to save a bit on cost and not another trip to Home Depot, I decided to rip a few pieces of extra plywood that I had laying around from the project and use that as our door trim. The pieces that I ripped were approximately 4 inches wide, and I put a 45-degree mitered corner on one side of each board. With that, I positioned the boards on both sides of our doorway, making sure that our 45-degree mitered corner lines up appropriately with our door casing. In terms of application, I'm only using a 23 gauge pin nailer because I do want something that's just going to secure this down, but if I ever need to remove it, I can easily do so with these nails as well. With our trim now accounted for, I can now tape and visqueen off our doorway because I certainly don't want any overspray on this as well. And with that, we can start mixing up our interior paint. For our interior paint, we are going solely with our Firecoat interior product. Now this is a different formula and it's a bit of a smoother product to mix in comparison to the exterior version, but still nonetheless it has its same fire coating properties associated with it. For the interior portion, I was able to acquire a larger spray tip. This is a 633, which means that I have a larger spray fan, but I also have the ability to spray out larger quantities of paint through that tip, which means that it can handle the sizable particulates that are built into this paint. At this point in time, I wanted to say a huge and special thank you to the sponsor of this week's video, Firecoat. Now, I personally met them at a trade show last year, and I just absolutely loved the concept of their product. They're an Australian-based company, and I certainly feel like if there's any opportunity to potentially salvage your home during the course of a fire with a coat of paint, it is very advantageous to do so as a homeowner. Personally, it's devastating to know that there's hundreds of thousands of homes that go up in flames every single year, and personally for me, I literally just drove through wildfires in eastern Washington because my parents are building a brand new home out there. Now, Firecoat doesn't guarantee that your house is not going to burn down during a fire, but it certainly is just a preventative measure that would be nice to have, especially in areas where you're in a drier climate and more prone to wildfires. If you're interested in learning more about this product or where to purchase it, make sure you check out the link in the description box below because I'll have this product along with all the other products featured in this video. I also applied 2 coats of Firecoat on the interior portion of this project, and with this project I'm going to be leaving the vast majority of it white except for the back wall. The back wall is going to be a bit of an homage to the original BYOT, as in when I first started YouTube the first couple of years. If you know, you know, and if you do, note it in the comment section. But I certainly do love the fact that this OSB looks so unique and ornate when you apply a layer of silver spray paint to it. My favorite spray paint by far is Montana cans, and they just have an amazing array of colors and of course a beautiful silver. I wish I did actually purchase the sizable larger spray tips for these cans, which I certainly should have done for a project of this size, but we got it taken care of. Just make sure you were wearing a proper respirator when doing so. With this shed being built on a deck, I really could just utilize the deck flooring. However, because I want this space to be more of an inviting space for a gym area, I wanted to bring in some gym mats, but I also wanted a layer in between the decking and our mats because I don't want any chance of insects or anything else creeping up through the deck boards into our enclosed space. So I decided to leave the visqueen on as well as put a layer of tape all the way around the corners. As for mats, I picked up these all-purpose gym floor mats at Home Depot. They're 72 inches by 42 inches, and they're quite literally the perfect floor mats for this space based upon the size, which we'll get into a little further. But before we do that, we do have to slightly adjust our wall base height to guarantee that we're able to sneak our mats right underneath it. A multi-tool always works perfectly in these applications, but also make sure you're protecting your flooring at the same time. In order to guarantee these mats fit snug against our walls, I have to measure and cut accordingly. Now these mats are quite thick and heavy. They might not look like it, but these mats weigh 70 pounds a piece. And that's certainly not the heaviest thing I've hauled around at this job site, but it's certainly the most awkward piece of material that I've handled thus far, because it's basically trying to manage a screaming toddler, which I have plenty of experience with right now. The easiest way I found to cut it to the appropriate length is to make 2 measurements on each side, then lining them up with my 6-foot level and scoring that edge. With that edge scored, I can then bend it and start carving away at this large, thick rubber. Once cut, I drag it in position, making sure that the ends of our mats meet up perfectly, so I can then proceed to moving in the next piece. As I mentioned previously, I only had to purchase 6 of these mats in total to fill out this entire space, even with a small section at the very tail end of this room. Now this small section didn't perfectly line up with the edges that I did previously, however I didn't have to spend another $50 on a mat where I only needed a quarter of it, so it's a win-win from my perspective. In order to have a bit more of a professional feel and look to this space, I do bring in some rubber wall base. Now this rubber wall base comes in a nice long roll, which I roll out and then apply 2 heavy beads of rubber wall base adhesive to the back side. Now I am mindful of not putting too much of that adhesive towards the very top of the lip of the wall base, because I don't want that to spurt out when it's pressed up against the wall, so just be mindful of that, and I do give it approximately 3/4 inch of space from the application bead to the top of the wall base. In order to put the final finishing touch on this project, you obviously have to have a door handle to open and close said door. So I picked up a Schlage lock set at my local Home Depot, installed it, and guess what? We have an amazing, functional 12-foot by 12-foot shed. But just as I noted from the very beginning, let's give this paint a test. I figured if I'm not willing to burn down my shed a bit in order to show the properties of Firecoat, then I shouldn't be taking on the sponsorship to begin with, but luckily for all of us, it seems to work quite well. It's actually quite impressive, and it's so unique where these small fibers, they're very soft fibers that come up, and it seems to be creating some type of barrier in between our structure and the flame, and therefore providing much more likelihood of your building or structure to survive a fire. Now, in all honesty and full disclosure, I had the flame on this spot for approximately 10 seconds. Not very long. With something as minimal as this, the brand actually tells you don't have to apply the primer coat again. There's still enough buildup of Firecoat to be left there and still be utilized later down the road. So sand it, clean it, and top coat over it, which is all you need to do in this type of application. But in circumstances where there's further and heavier increases of heat and flame in a specific spot, you're most likely going to have to completely remove that Firecoat buildup and then apply another couple of coats of Firecoat in order to protect your structure once again. Case in point, I brought in a piece of plywood, which one piece is bare and the other piece has 2 layers of the interior Firecoat product. As you can imagine, after 30 seconds with the torch, that piece of plywood is donezo and charred to a crisp. However, after a full minute is applied to the piece of plywood with Firecoat, I was pleasantly surprised with what I found. It really does provide this unique protective barrier, because after you're done applying the heat to it, you can go back to it with a scraper and literally scrape off this product. Now, it might look like it's completely charred as previously done to the opposite piece, but it's not. This is just the char from the paint, and the bare wood underneath it is miraculously fine, especially in comparison to the opposite piece. The structural integrity to the original piece of plywood is significantly worse, and I figured if I did it to plywood, I wanted to make sure we also tested it on the OSB as well to see what would come of it. One piece is bare OSB, and the other piece is just OSB with a couple layers of exterior Firecoat. In this demonstration, I did apply the same amount of heat, so I did apply approximately 1 minute of flame to each piece just to see what the difference is going to be. Also, instead of just listening to me, it's also satisfying to listen to how it burns, so here you go. Just as the previous piece, you're able to scrape off all this excess paint particles, and what's left behind is a staggering piece of OSB that really hasn't been degraded structurally. This one might be a little dirtier than the plywood, but it's certainly still much more structurally sound than the original piece. Now, I'm personally not saying that this product is going to save your house during a wildfire of some sort, but there are hundreds of thousands of homes that are burnt down every single year in the United States, and a simple product like this that makes life and assurances just a little bit better for your own personal sake is something that I'd say is invaluable. Firecoat puts on multiple test burns to showcase their product to different municipalities to really show the benefits of their product nationwide. Now, I have actually been invited to one of these, which I am really hoping to go to in the near future, so if we do, I'm certainly going to be bringing my camera with me to see how this product does in a grander scale. And speaking of grand scale, this is by far the biggest project I've taken on this channel. I'm so proud of how it turned out. Not only is it aesthetically beautiful, but it's certainly one of the best built sheds that I've seen out there, and I cannot wait to put this home gym into some good use. Now, this was a long video series, so I have put all these videos into a playlist, and inevitably will probably make one long video eventually for this build, but I'm also making plans, so if you're interested in plans for this build, make sure you check them out in the link provided in the description box below. But till then, this is truly one beautiful, sexy beast of a home gym. Oh yeah,